Hey guys, what's up? It's Timothy here. This is day 3 of spoilers. It is August 18th. I'm sorry, 17th, whatever. It's a Wednesday. We are going to go ahead and jump right into spoilers. We've still got a bunch coming out. I don't know if they're all going to be up by this Friday. Normally, full spoilers for a set are up the Friday before it launches, and launch is next Friday. So it is possible that they cram out all of the spoilers by this Friday, or they cram out most of them and give us the full spoiler by Friday. Something tells me that's just a lot of cards, so it might not happen. It might be a little later than Friday, but as of right now, we've still got a bunch of spoilers rolling in, so we're going to go ahead and jump right into the latest one, which was spoiled just a little while ago. This is a rare conspiracy called Weight Advantage. So you start it with the card face up in the command zone, which means, you know, it's going to be prevalent throughout the entire game. And it's one of those unique, like, Doran type effects. It says each creature you control assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. Now, Assault Formation and Doran are, I believe, the only cards in Magic history that do this. Assault Formation is one of my favorite cards of all time, so is Doran. I really just love this sort of effect. It turns the game of Magic kind of on its heels and makes things work differently than they're intended to work. So high toughness creatures are supposed to be like that for a reason. They're designed that way to, you know, kind of present a roadblock and a problem for your opponent to deal with. But when you turn that into an actual attacker, it's not what the card was designed for, so it has potential to make those cards really, really busted. So far, I want to point out that we haven't seen a lot of high toughness creatures. In fact, most of what we've seen so far is 5-mana 4/4s, which we'll see more of today. I think there's that 1/04 in blue, but that's pretty much it as far as like high toughness creatures go for their mana cost. A couple things to note about this: it doesn't do anything with Defender. So we've seen a couple cards, or we will see a couple that make like constructs with Defender. Unlike Assault Formation, this doesn't actually give you the ability to make Defenders attack. So don't just assume it's a carbon copy of that sort of effect. Second off, it only affects your creatures, and it only affects combat damage. So Assault Formation was like this. It only affected your creatures, but Doran actually affected all creatures on the battlefield, meaning that it could give your opponent an advantage with certain cards or disadvantage with others. Last thing I'll note about this conspiracy is it doesn't have a color identity. It doesn't go in your deck. It is a conspiracy after all. So unlike something like Assault Formation, you don't have to be in specific colors to take advantage of it. Like Doran, you don't have to be in a specific shard to take advantage of that. Or I guess that's a wedge. It is Abzan colors. But this is pretty cool. It's the type of card you would take early and draft around it, or you would have a certain type of deck that could take advantage of it, but you may not always want it. You'll probably see it late because it is the type of card that requires you to take generally weaker creatures. But the nice thing is if your deck is built to abuse this, then you'll always have this sort of effect since you'll start the game with this in play. So it's pretty nice. Unlike, for instance, if you ever played Assault Formation in Dragons of Tarkir, which was really good, by the way. Some people don't think it was, but it was fantastic. You had to actually find the Assault Formation before you could start wreaking havoc with it. So pretty cool conspiracy. It is rare, though, so I don't know if I'd be willing to first pick it or not. Wild Pair is in this set. It is a reprint from Planar Chaos. It was also in that premium sliver deck where all the cards were foil. Had the same art, though. This is new art for the card, and really the second printing of the card in a actual, you know, draftable set. Or an actual, like, store-bought set or something like that. The premium decks, a lot of people just don't like the foiling on those. They're kind of like the from the vault foiling. But for those of you who don't know what Wild Pair does, it's 4 and 2 green for an enchantment that says whenever a creature enters your side of the battlefield, if you cast it from your hand, that's important, you may search your library for a creature card with the same total power and toughness and put it onto the battlefield and shuffle your library, of course. So a couple things to note. The creature can enter the battlefield from anywhere for this to have any sort of effect, or the opposite of what I just said. It has to be from your hand in order for you to search out a creature with this. The power and toughness don't have to be the same, but the total power and toughness has to be the same. So if I cast a 4/2 creature, I can search my deck for a 3/3 because that adds up to 6. Another thing, power and toughness boosts on the battlefield don't count. Because this triggers when you cast a creature. Actually, that's incorrect. It actually triggers when the creature enters the battlefield, but only works if you cast the creature. So power and toughness boosts do count. In other words, if I cast a 3/3 and it enters the battlefield and it's getting some sort of +1/+1 effect from a ward, for instance, then it's actually a 4/4, and I can go search my deck for a creature that has total power and toughness 8. Sorry for the kind of blunder there with what I said, but that last part is actually true. Because when it enters the battlefield, it will have certain adjustments on it, assuming there's no like triggered abilities when it enters the battlefield. But static abilities that affect the power and toughness will affect what you can search up with Wild Pair. How good is this card? Well, I know in the Premium Sliver deck it was great, and I've actually seen this played in Commander a lot. It is a 6-mana enchantment. It will not do anything the turn you cast it unless you're also casting a creature somehow. So it's really, really expensive, but it's actually really strong. The problem is the creatures you can tutor up are very specific. Now, we've already mentioned there are a lot of 5-mana 4/4s. A ton of them actually, and we're only like 30-40 cards into the set. So being able to play a 4/4 and then go fetch out another 4/4 and put it on the battlefield automatically is pretty strong. That basically doubles the amount of power and toughness you're putting into play whenever you cast a creature from your hand. So if you can get to the point where you have this on the battlefield and you still have action in your hand, it's definitely going to help you pull ahead. The problem is it is a 6-mana enchantment. Games of multiplayer can go pretty fast if you're just kind of dirtling around not doing anything, so I don't know how excited I would be to play this card. It's definitely something I would like to have in my pool and then look back at my creatures and see how they stack up, but it's totally possible to have this card and then a bunch of creatures with, you know, totally different power toughness spreads, so it might be completely useless. But from what we've seen, it seems like it'd be pretty decent. It's worth noting you can play like an 0/4 and go fetch like a 1/3 or a 3/1 or something like that, or a 2/2 bear. So enough on Wild Pair. On to Burgeoning. This is a reprint, and a very good reprint too. It's originally from Stronghold. Right now it has like a $20 price tag on it, maybe even more, and it's never been printed outside of Stronghold as far as I know. Stronghold also didn't have foils, so this will be the first time people can get Burgeoning in foils. And this is a fantastic commander card. I don't know how good it is in draft. I honestly can't say. I'm not a huge fan of these sorts of effects that let you dump out lands. But in multiplayer, that can do quite a bit. So imagine a situation in which you're playing against 3 other people, and you play this on turn 1, perhaps you're on the play, and everybody else plays a land. That's 3 additional lands you can have on the battlefield by your next turn. It also means you don't necessarily have to play land drops on your turn, since your opponents probably will. You can put them onto the battlefield. Not that that really makes a difference, but this is a type of card that is really, really good early in the game, but actually drops off quite a bit towards the end of the game. I don't like it as much as Exploration in a multiplayer 40-card deck, but it's pretty decent. It also works pretty nicely with the Monarch ability, because if you are the Monarch, you're going to draw extra cards on your end step, meaning if you hit a land and you have Burgeoning on the battlefield, you'll probably be able to get that land onto the battlefield by the time it comes back to your next turn. So it works really nicely with being the Monarch, and I'm assuming that was the idea behind this card being reprinted, besides people just needing it. It's really cool in Commander. Obviously, the more card draw you have, the more card flow you have in your library, the better it gets. That's more lands you can dump out. And clearly you can play like some really busted decks where you can get like a 5-drop out on turn 2 if everything goes really smoothly, but that requires a certain opening hand, you know, a really high concentration of expensive cards in your deck. Not to mention you need the Burgeoning on turn 1. This is a terrible top deck later in the game. It really is. Cards like this always are, but it's a card that definitely needed a reprint. Should drive the price down a little bit and at least be more accessible. And for those people who really want foils of it, there you go. You finally have a chance to get them. So pretty cool card. Moving on to Sanctum Prelate. I don't know. I know it's like a bishop, but I don't know how to pronounce the word. Sanctum Prelate. We're going to call it a prelate. This is 1 double white for a 2/2 mythic human cleric. This is a mythic. When he, she, it enters the battlefield, choose a number. Any number, no restrictions. Non-creature spells with converted mana cost equal to the chosen number can't be cast. Now, I will go on the record as saying this is probably not very good in limited. It will limit, obviously, what certain opponents can do, but you're against 3 other players. Just saying, okay, I'm going to name 4, and suddenly you can't cast 4 drops. Somebody around the table is going to be able to get around that. Unless you specifically know what your opponents are playing, then this card drops off quite a bit. You know how people always share the type of cards they've pulled at the table? Those are the type of cards you would hate out with this. This would be a lot better if you could sideboard it in once you see what your opponents are playing, but the problem with that is there's no sideboarding in a multiplayer game. It's one and done. So I'm not super excited about this card. Where it does obviously have implications is Legacy, where you can name, 1, 2, or 3, and you're going to shut down a huge portion of your opponent's deck. So you name 1, people can't play Gitaxian Probes, they can't play all those other 1-drops, Brainstorm, stuff like that. You name 2 against like a counterbalance deck, and they can't get their counterbalance on board, things like that. And you name 3, like counterbalance can no longer win. They have to get rid of the prelate first, so on and so forth. So very hate bears kind of card. Very reminiscent of cards like this, and I think this will see Legacy play, maybe in the sideboard of certain decks. I can't tell you exactly where, but probably see Commander play too for people who just don't want other people to have a good time, because you can just play this and name the mana cost of an opponent's commander, and it'll shut down that commander from being cast in addition to anything else they might have. Actually, that's completely wrong because it's non-creature spells, but whatever. Ignore me today. Apparently, I'm not reading cards fully, but I caught myself. Non-creature spells, so they can still cast creatures, making this probably a little bit worse against like zoo-style decks, but those aren't really big in Legacy. Yeah, so like I said, I'm not super excited about this in Limited, but it will have applications in Legacy. Whether or not it actually sees play there is beyond me. I don't play a lot of Legacy, as I've stated, but sorry, I don't think you can see it up here, but I accidentally hit back on my computer. Next reprint, very, very good choice, about friggin' time, right? Serum Visions is being reprinted at Uncommon. It was originally from 5th Dawn, and that's really the only set that it's been printed in. There are a couple promo versions floating around, for instance, the F&M promo from last year, but you really had to be there for the month and had to win to get a hold of that, or you still have to pay like the $6, $7, whatever for one. Just regular non-foil versions of this card from 5th Dawn are still $5 or $6, and it's a very, very heavily played card. Specifically in Modern, because it fills the role of Preordain, Ponder, Brainstorm, stuff like that, which we don't have access to in Modern. And Serum Visions is just so expensive for what it does that it has no business being a $5 card. It really doesn't. Draw spells like this shouldn't run you that much money, regardless of how good they are. But it gets played in so many blue decks, Scapeshift style decks, Delver decks, so on and so forth. Pretty much any combo deck like Storm that plays blue and really wants to hit specific cards, Serum Visions is there. It doesn't actually see a lot of play outside of those formats because there are better versions of this card in other formats. But it's due for a reprint, and it is worth noting Conspiracy Take the Crown is not like an Eternal Masters or Modern Masters set where the limited print run is going to affect it. Conspiracy is going to be printed en masse. You can get boxes for, probably the price of a normal set, or, like a normal standard set, and you're going to open up at least 1, 2, maybe more Serum Visions in the uncommon slot, as well as from prize packs and stuff like that, and packs aren't going to run you $10, $11. I don't normally advocate for buying packs from like Walmart or Target, but they will be available there, so you can definitely pick them up, and this is going to make the card way more accessible. I do think it will finally drop the price a little bit because it is in a mass printed set. So this is very exciting. Serum Visions needs a reprint. It's very good at what it does, and people need to get copies of it without paying $5 for, you know, a card from 5th Dawn that hasn't ever been reprinted in a mass quantity. Moving on, Entourage of Trest. This is a 4 and a green common 4/4 elf soldier. So the theme of 5 mana 4/4. Here we go. When it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. So this might be the first green card that I've seen say that on it. There is definitely one in each color, but I don't remember seeing a green one yet. It can block an additional creature each combat as long as you're the monarch. So that's a pretty decent ability. It doesn't make the card like super exciting, and I think common is exactly where this card should be. It's it's not unplayable by any means. It will probably go into your deck, assuming you're not like jamming tons of 5-drops, and it's a decent effect that helps you once you become the monarch. It helps you stay the monarch by being able to, you know, pose as a pretty strong blocker against anybody who wants to hit you and take the monarch crown from you. So hopefully you'll be able to draw a bunch of cards off of being the monarch before it gets taken if you're playing cards like this. 4/4 body is a little bit underwhelming against 2 creatures that are attacking you. It'll usually be able to kill one and then soak up the damage from another, so it's pretty decent, but I'm not actually that excited about this card. Not to mention that it's just a vanilla 4 mana 5/5 if you're not, or a 5 mana 4/4 if you're not the monarch. Then it doesn't actually have that ability. But the ETB, you become the monarch thing, is something that I've already mentioned. It essentially says draw at least a card, because you'll become the monarch and then you'll probably be the monarch until the end of that turn. It's very hard, almost impossible unless you concede. Very hard to lose the monarchy in the same turn that you play something that makes you become the monarch, unless somebody's able to flash in a creature that lets them become the monarch or something along those lines. Anyway, moving on to another Planeswalker in this set. So far 2 Planeswalkers in this set, which is pretty big because Dak Faden was the only Planeswalker in the first conspiracy, but we're getting another Daretti card. The first Daretti card was just blow out of the water, like absolutely bonkers card. I and all my friends and all their moms have a Daretti deck floating around somewhere. It was a great pre-con, but anyway, you gotta make sure you don't fall in that category of comparing like a legendary or Planeswalker, you know, character to its old versions, because it is a completely new card. But anyway, Daretti Ingenious Iconoclast is Rakdos colors too. I believe Sarkhan the Mad, or whichever Sarkhan it is the only Rakdos colored commander, and it's not a particularly good one for Rakdos colors. It's more of like a dragon commander, I believe. I don't actually know what the card does very much. It's the one that ticks down. But anyway, 1 black and a red. So a 3 mana Planeswalker, which even though this isn't standard viable, 3 mana Planeswalkers are usually a lot better than they end up looking, even if they look pretty decent. Look at Liliana, Nissa, even things like Ashiok are pretty strong. But you have a 1 black and a red for a 3 mana Mythic Planeswalker. +1, put a 1/1 colorless construct artifact creature token with Defender onto the battlefield. Okay. -1. You may sacrifice an artifact. If you do, destroy target artifact or creature. And then -6, choose target artifact card in a graveyard or artifact on the battlefield. Put 3 tokens that are copies of it onto the battlefield. Alright, so a lot of strong things that this does here. +1 is a standard Planeswalker ability. It does make a Defender, so it's not like you can go super crazy with this, but it does make an artifact too, for whatever that's relevant for. I do think it's kind of weird that there's a card in the set that makes a 1/2 Construct Defender, and this card makes a 1/1 Construct Defender, but +1 to make a 1/2 seems a lot stronger. +1 to make a 1/1 blocker is still pretty decent. -1 is very, very strong, and obviously it incentivizes you to go something like +1, -1, +1, -1, because you make an artifact and then you sacrifice an artifact, and then you can blow up any creature on the board, or if there's an artifact that's really trouble, blow that up. So if something like Crawl Space gets printed in this set, or something that's making it really hard for you to get through your opponent, like Silent Arbiter was in the last Conspiracy set, you can destroy an artifact with that -1 ability. And the artifact you sacrifice can be anything, but it's very likely going to be that construct that you +1 for in the first place. So creature destruction is really nice. It is really nice that if you just have artifacts sitting around, you can play this -1 and blow something up right away, which is really strong for a 3-mana Planeswalker. They normally don't have destruction abilities on them. And then that -6 isn't really an ultimate. You're not getting some emblem off of it, but depending on what you have, you can get some pretty crazy results out of this. So you pick an artifact. It can be in a graveyard or anyone's side of the field, anyone's graveyard. Just an artifact that exists somewhere in the game besides someone's deck or hand, and you get 3 copies of it, regardless of whose graveyard or whose side of the battlefield it was on. So we haven't seen anything that I think this is really crazy with, but if there's some sort of big artifact creature, you know, we're probably not going to see Wormcoil Engine, but something along those lines, just a big blow away artifact creature, or even like I don't know, a Gilded Lotus or something that gives you so much mana. Getting 3 copies of that is pretty good. Not to mention, you can usually get to the point where you -6 and still have Daretti around. He'll often be at 4 loyalty by the end of the turn you play him, and he comes down super early. Probably put a target on your head. Same kind of problem with what's her face, the black-white commander, or Planeswalker, but you do get a target on your face just for having a Planeswalker, and if you play Commander, you know that Planeswalkers don't usually live that long. They get targeted very, very early on, and they die very quickly. But one last interesting note about this guy is he is in black, and I'm blanking on her name, but the other Planeswalker, the Orzhov one, is also in black, and it's very peculiar that if there were only 2 Planeswalkers, they would both share a color here, so not very representative of the whole color circle, obviously giving black a lot of power, which leads me to believe that there may be another Planeswalker to expect in this set to kind of balance things out, perhaps a white-green Planeswalker representing the other 2 colors that we didn't get with these first 2, so we'll see. Maybe like Selvala as a Planeswalker now or something like that. That'd actually be pretty sweet. But talking a long time about Daretti, I love Daretti. I think this card's very, very strong. Another one to kind of talk a lot about here is Aliyah, Emissary of Trest. This is a black, green, blue, Sultai colored 3/3 legendary creature. It is an elf advisor, and it's mythic. Go over the ability real quick before we really talk about what it can do. Each opponent can't draw more than 1 card each turn. Whenever you or a permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you may draw a card. Alright, so a lot to talk about with this card, and I'm going to try to make it quick so I'm not spending 10 minutes on one guy. But first things first, for those of you who don't know what Tiny Leaders is, it's a sub kind of variant of Commander, where your commander has to be converted mana cost 3 or less. And as far as I'm aware, if I remember correctly, Tiny Leaders had a commander in every color combination or every wedge and shard except for Sultai. So this is actually the first Sultai colored commander that you can use in Tiny Leaders. He can be the commander of your Tiny Leader deck. It's not a very popular format. Very kind of niche. You have to find a crowd that likes it, but it's a lot of fun, and this guy fills that role, probably intentionally, I think. Second off, he's just a really good commander. Third off, that effect about your opponents not being able to draw extra cards kind of takes a little bit of heat off as far as being the Monarch goes, because when you're the Monarch in a regular game, what I imagine is people will oftentimes sacrifice creatures to attack into you just so they can connect with at least one of their creatures and become the Monarch. But while you control this guy, being the Monarch doesn't affect any of the other players. They're not allowed to draw that extra card on the end step because of his effect. So it kind of takes a little bit of heat off of you. Obviously, people might still be interested in taking care of or becoming the Monarch, so that if they do take care of him, they will again draw cards. But pretty nice. Spirit of the Labyrinth effect also doesn't affect you, only affects your opponent, so you still draw those extra cards. Pretty nice. And then that last part, whenever you are a permanent, you or a permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability. So target anything on my side of the board, including Leovold himself, and I'm drawing a card. Do have to be careful. If you get carried away, you can get decked with this sort of ability. So if your opponents are all playing tappers and they just cannot get through you, you're walling up because you're playing Sultai and you're playing the dirtiest colors on Earth, then you know, it is possible to use these kind of repeatable effects to target your stuff and make you draw so many cards that you deck out. Obviously, that won't be how this plays out. The idea is, you know, if people throw removal your way, then you're going to draw cards and replace those cards that they're killing, including Leovold. If they target Leovold, he's going to draw you a card. So this is altogether a fantastic card. I would love to see what kind of commander decks pop out of it. I'm happy to see that those 4 or 5 tiny leader players in the world get their Sultai colored tiny leader that they've all maybe been waiting for. I don't know. But yeah, enough about Elf Guy. Let's move on. A couple more to go here, including ones I didn't get to yesterday, but I covered most of those. So we're going to give it just a second here. All right, so internet's being a little off here. We'll just go ahead and keep it on this page. Keeper of the Keys is next card up here. This is 5 mana 4/4. Zing, right? Just do that every time we say 5 mana 4/4. I don't know what shorthand for that is, by the way, but I need to learn very quickly. Keeper of the Keys is a rare. It's a human rogue mutant. Like, just tack some abilities on there, because why not? When it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. So we've got that ability in a blue rare here. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if you are the monarch, creatures you control can't be blocked this turn. That's a very strong ability. One that really wants you to be the monarch at all times. So you're drawing that extra card on your end step, and then all your creatures are essentially unblockable for the turn. I'm also, if I'm reading this correctly, it doesn't say like, it's a static ability that affects you. So if you play any like haste creatures during the course of your turn, I believe they're unblockable for the turn too. I don't think it's a... It is a triggered ability, I believe. I don't know, maybe. I need a little clarification on this card. I don't actually think it is a triggered ability. I think it's just a static ability that's relevant if you are the monarch on your upkeep. But regardless, this is very powerful because you've got a 4/4 unblockable here, if you're the monarch, of course. And then all your other creatures are unblockable too. You can wipe players out by doing this or playing this at the right time. And also just want to say the flavor on this card's pretty cool. The flavor text especially says, for the right price, he'll unlock the path to the throne, right? So he has the path to the throne. He comes down, he makes you the monarch because he can lead you to the throne. And then if you're still the monarch, like, he can lead all your other people to victory because he has the keys. So really cool. Mutant type. Whatever, but super strong card, pretty cool. Commander playable by all means. Become, like I said, those enter the battlefield triggers are a way to introduce becoming the monarch into a commander game, which is really nice. Let's see if we're working here. Yep, Spy Kit. All right. Apparently this was spoiled by Tolarian Community College, which I haven't watched the video yet, but his the professor's videos are usually pretty cool. 2 mana equipment, 2 to equip for an uncommon. The equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has all names of non-legendary creature cards in addition to its name. This is obviously intended for, what is it called? Hidden agenda or even double agenda, where whatever creature you have equipped gets the benefit of... has all names of non-legendary creature card. Yeah, it gets the benefit of literally every single hidden agenda or double agenda card you play. Notice that the way this is worded, it just has everything's name. It doesn't necessarily have to be on the battlefield. So if a card tells you to affect a specific type of creature, or if it specifically name drops a creature, like an example coming to mind right now is Biovisionary. It says if you control 4 creatures named Biovisionary, you win the game. Spy Kit can let you achieve that. In this set, I don't know that it's going to do too much else that's really cute, except for work with hidden agenda or double agenda by, you know, allowing that creature to be its name. But it's a pretty sweet card. The bonus, the +1/+1, isn't very strong for the amount of mana you have to play into it. So you really want it for that second ability, which is a very unique ability, not something I've really seen before. So kudos to this card. I think it's really cool. But with that being said, the equipment itself isn't very strong at all. So if you're not getting some sort of benefit off of that second clause, you don't run this card by any means. Let's see what we missed. Looks like only 2 more. Exotic Orchard is a reprint. I don't know from what set off the top of my head. I know it's or I believe it's Shards of Alara block, but I don't actually know what set. I also believe it was printed in a Plane Chase set or something along those lines. Again, I don't know which Plane Chase or anything like that. But it's a really wonky land, and it's essentially like a reflecting pool for your opponent's land. So if your opponent's land can tap for, green, then Exotic Orchard can tap for green. It also doesn't care about like restrictions and stuff like that. So for instance, if your opponent's playing like a Vivid land, which probably won't be in the set, then Exotic Orchard can tap for any color of mana regardless of how many counters are on the Vivid land. But this is very close to something like a 3 or 4 colored land in Commander, or not in Commander, but in a 4-person game. Keep in mind, if you're playing with the people you drafted with, it's very likely that a couple of those players are going to be branched into different color combinations and things like that. Exotic Orchard, it has like a very, very tiny risk of being in your deck and not tapping for the colors of your deck, but that's not very likely. It's very, very likely that if, for instance, you're in white-black, then one of the other people you play against will also be playing white, and one of the other people will be playing black. So Exotic Orchard will very likely tap for your colors, in addition to a couple other colors that you may not be able to tap for. Now, question is, why would I want to play Exotic Orchard over just, like a basic land or something like that? And that's really, if you have effects that let you copy your opponent's creatures, or if you have effects that let you steal your opponent's creatures, and those creatures have activated abilities, those activated abilities will often require a certain color of mana, and then you can not only use your opponent's creature against them, but you can use their mana to generate the mana you need for Exotic Orchard to activate those abilities. So it's very kind of like a situational land that will most of the time tap for at least one of your colors. I don't think it's necessary, and again, I wish this wasn't a rare because I wouldn't be super happy first picking it out of a pack. I would like to get it a lot later. Reflect and Pool was actually in the first Conspiracy, and I like Reflect and Pool a lot more than Exotic Orchard, but it's still kind of a cute card. It fits the flavor of the set by kind of like being a little bit better when you're playing against more people. But my experience with the Exotic Orchard is I would rather just have like a dual land in its place most of the time. All right, last card to talk about today, Confiscate Riches. Again, we don't know if that's the actual name. That's just a rough translation, which usually means it's not the actual name, but it's 9 mana. So that's a big red flag there. 9 mana is a lot for a 4-person game. You're usually dead before 9 mana, but sorcery too is, we're not starting off good. Council's Dilemma. Starting with you, each player votes time or money. For each player that voted time, take an extra turn. For each player that voted money, 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 gain control of a permanent that player owns. Exile this card. So you're not doing any crazy shenanigans with it by recurring it from the graveyard. It is a mythic. It's 9 mana. It's sorcery. Don't expect to see this played. And in fact, I'm not even sure the strength here is like, 7 mana worthy. It's definitely strong. Don't get me wrong, but I'm sorry, 9 mana, not 7. It's definitely strong. Don't get me wrong. But 9 mana is so much. So you kind of have to figure how is this going to play out. First off, you get a vote. And you're not going to vote for gain control of a permanent that player owns unless somebody has something that you own. So you're very likely going to vote for time. So you're probably going to take at least 1 extra turn with this. With that in mind, other players will vary depending on what their board state looks like. If they've got a bunch of little weak creatures all spread out, they're probably going to let you take one of their permanents before they let you take a second extra turn, because you can do a lot with extra turns. So a lot of times I'll see this split between take 2 turns, or the way I'm envisioning it is you'll often like take 2 turns and maybe take 2 permanents, or take 3 permanents, take 1 extra turn. Like, I think people will be a little bit more willing at 9 mana to let you take a permanent than let you take an additional turn on top of taking other permanents. So it's very difficult to see how this will play out. And those cards that give you extra votes, or those cards that we saw in Uncommon on the first day that lets you decide how other players vote, that is really where you want to be playing this card. So on its own, 9 mana is so much. 9 mana, take 4 turns is crazy. And keep in mind, I'm talking about limited here. I'm talking about, 40 card decks, and I'm talking about, a 4-person game where one of the colors seems you want to beat the face down, like red-white just seems to want to get in there. So 9 mana is killer. But in Commander, this is a whole different ballgame. Like, this is crazy good in Commander. With the potential to read like 9 mana, take 4 extra turns. That's quite a bit. Or at the very least, it's going to be like Blatant Thievery plus take an extra turn, which is still really good. So exciting for Commander. Probably not actually that exciting for Limited. I just see 9 mana being way too much for that sort of effect. I don't know. Let me know your opinion on it, but there we go. That's a good 12 more spoilers between my last video and this one, with a lot of good reprints. Burgeoning, Serum Visions, we saw Phyrexian Arena. Last thing I will mention before I call this video quits is this guy, Recruiter of the Guard. Yesterday I kind of bumbled on what Imperial Recruiter does. Recruiter of the Guard is essentially the same exact card, but it looks for toughness instead of power. Imperial Recruiter searches for power 2 or less. I believe I said mana cost or something. But this is almost a color-shifted version of Imperial Recruiter, which is on the reserve list, by the way. Imperial Recruiter is like a $200 card for the same kind of effect. Recruiter of the Guard has like a starting price tag of like 20 to 30 bucks, just so you know. It is a money card. It is legacy playable. People were telling me about Hate Bears and how or Death and Taxes really in legacy, how good this can be in that sort of deck to search up all sorts of things, and it's pretty freaking good. Anyway, that's all for today. Not quite as long of a video as the last ones, but still really cool cards coming in. Last thing before I say goodbye, keep in mind that Conspiracy, probably about half this set will be reprints, and while we're seeing a lot of really good ones, expect a lot of the commons and uncommons to be reprints. It is a supplemental product that will have a lot of new cards in it, but the majority of the set will be reprints, I believe. So be prepared by whenever the full spoiler is to have a lot of those kind of janky common cards and stuff like that come out. But I'm impressed with what I've seen. I think the reprints are awesome. I think the cards are great, and I think the flavor is wonderful. I think the multiplayer action is going to be way, way, way better than the last Conspiracy, and that was already a pretty high bar to top. Anyway, thank you guys again for watching my videos. The 2 or 3 of you who are watching them, I appreciate you a lot. Yes, you especially. Because you could be watching anyone's videos, but you're watching mine, especially if you got up to this point. Don't you have better things to do? But thank you for your time. My name is Timothy, and I will see you guys tomorrow for more spoiler videos. Thanks, and see you later.